Morning. It's Friday, March 11th, and finally I found a piece of good news. With all the news that's been going on with the shootings and the war in the Ukraine, I searched for some good news. Now, the news I found may not be considered good by lots of people, but I find this particular article very good news. It's the conviction, the first conviction of anybody that was involved in the insurrection on January 6th. And that's a long time ago, 15 months before they arrived with putting one person in jail, convicted. They've got 700 or so people lined up, but this is the first one that has gone to court, had a trial, and was convicted. So in this first criminal trial, Guy Reffitt, a 3% militia member, he wore a helmet and body armor as he attacked the police defending the Capitol. And he was found guilty of obstructing the certification of President Joe Biden's 2020 victory. He was also found guilty of carrying a gun illegally in a mob that day. And he also threatened his children in an attempt to keep the authorities in the dark. So this was not a very nice guy. This trial was very important to the Justice Department. It was considered a big victory. And this is the Justice Department that has only just begun what we'll call a marathon process of bringing to trial many of the rioters accused of storming the Capitol or assaulting the police outside on January 6th in 2021. So it's a monumental effort that the Justice Department has just begun to get these people to trial. The prosecutors in this case used an unusual charge. It was called obstruction. And because they used obstruction to charge this particular defendant, and because they won this case on the charge of obstruction, that is sending a message to many of the others who are awaiting trial that possibly they should plead guilty. Because if this person was convicted of obstruction along with the other crimes, then all of them will be considered guilty if they were there as of obstruction. And that was the purpose of putting obstruction into this case. It was definitely something that they needed because of the massive amounts of people that are awaiting trial. So if they can reduce the number of people that take themselves to trial, it will be to their benefit. They can maybe get this thing over more quickly. Of course, there are many who are in that crowd that are facing much more serious charges than obstruction. So Reffitt's role in this obstruction, in this insurrection, was highlighted by the fact that he was carrying a pistol. And he, at some point in time, boldly claimed that there were many people who were carrying arms alongside him. And that's a contradiction to what President Trump said. Trump said nobody there was armed. But Reffitt, when he went home, he boasted to his family and fellow militia members in Texas in January that he and other insurrectionists had brought guns to the siege. They called it a siege, you see. He said the people around me were all carrying. I had a constitutional right to carry a weapon and take over Congress. And that's what we tried to do. We went in and they ran like rats and hid. And that's how it works when patriots take action. Can you imagine that somebody like Reffitt is outside armed with a gun, probably ready to shoot anybody, lucky that he didn't, and claiming that many others had guns and they were prepared to take over the Capitol. There's no question about this being an insurrection. And they have all of this stuff because they wiretapped him in some way, shape, or form. So there's no way that anybody could believe that this was just a regular tourist day, like several Republicans said. Just regular tourists, a regular day at the Capitol. So I think that this trial is very good news, and I think that it was a great victory for those of us who watched that awful day take place. And we are not giving this trial enough publicity. This trial should be blasted all over the country. I had to look hard to find a news article about this trial. This trial indicates the levels to which we have sunk in this country. If we have armed militia in this country willing to overturn a legal and well-run election just because they don't like the results, just because their dictator was shed from office. We need to show the people of this country exactly what happened on that day. Every minute detail needs to be shown. This was not an ordinary day, not a straight tourist day. This was a revolution in the making, and we are suffering the consequences. This is worse than the pandemic that we're faced with. This is a tremendous schism in our society that we have people, armed people. We don't have enough gun violence. We have armed people running around protesting against our democracy. This is not what the United States of America is supposed to be standing for. This is a nation of laws, a nation where people are allowed to express their opinions. But it's not a nation where you can put violence ahead of anything that is legal, anything that legally happens. We have freedoms, too many freedoms perhaps, and we have rights, and maybe we have too many rights, because all of those interfere with what has to really get done from time to time. And so I'm hoping that this trial broadcasts to the world and to the rest of this country that what happened on January 6th, 2021 was a national disaster. Should not be celebrated in any way, shape, or form. And I'm glad that this trial finally took place, and I can understand why it takes so long. The magnitude of evidence that had to be gathered to prove once and for all that this was an insurrection, to prove that these people were carrying weapons and they meant to do harm if they could. And I think we were lucky that only a few people died that day. So that's what I have today. That's what I want to tell you. Have a great day. Bye.